Would you like me?
Please, novel.
All right. So, the Bond Accountability Committee meeting for November 2019. And if we would like to do introductions of our BAC members that are here tonight.
It'll take a long time to go through all of them.
Let's do
Go ahead.
I'm Tom Peterson, BAC.
And Greg DiLoretto, BAC.
I am Marina Crespo, I'm the Senior Director of the Office of School Organization. We are not going to do introductions of the rest of the folks in the room. They will introduce themselves when they need to present. So we'll go ahead and get started. Johnny, do we know if there were any other comments?
Oh, they were not.
Okay. Thank you. So we will go ahead and get started with the report from the program. Of course, it's the same thing you show every time. This one's actually particularly pertinent this time. So just note that the data that we show on our equity participation is dependent on information from our contractors and subcontractors reporting on their certified business participation. To the extent that that information is reported based upon payments made, it can be delayed. So there's often a limited delay in data from what is reported to what we see in reports. And why this is important to us today is because you're going to see that we have a change, particularly in our 12-month rolling period of equity data at our fund administration report, primarily because we discovered our purchasing and contracting folks. So there was a file transfer error that occurred between downloading payment data from our system, our district system, to the certified business system, and it impacted the percentage participation negatively. So you will see a pretty significant difference between the current 12-month and the prior 12 months. You'll see a much smaller difference on the cumulative. Those numbers will eventually start working their way back up. So you can expect this is sort of a one-time adjustment, trending down, and then I think we'll start seeing them moving back up. Just in general, though, we do continue to do pretty well. We're working very closely towards that 18%. Overall, cumulatively, we're continuing to increase. We see some blips here and there, but the middle school continues to increase. No real news on the workforce equity. The numbers are essentially identical. Last time, our apprenticeship is at 3%. Our minority participation is 29%. News, so that we continue to do. Moving on to budget information, what you see on the screen is 2012. And I'm going to say basically the same thing I said last time. There's no new news. We are essentially done. 99% spent. Whatever pennies we keep spending don't really change that very much. We are still continuing to reconcile. Don't be too excited about money that says it's coming back. We're still working through that, and some of that may actually be non-bond funds that the time is bringing into non-bond. So I wouldn't look at that and say, yeah, $500,000. We probably do that. We'll keep working on that though. The Grant Upper Field Improvement Project, there are a couple of notes on the report in your packet. You won't see them on the screen, but it is continuing to wait for some items that were delayed by supply chain issues, boards in particular, the real pain on our side. I'd love to get this out there. Yes. So as soon as we have this, Unless there are questions on 2012.
Yeah, so. Your comment about the non-bond, so funds are embedded in this over under.
They are.
So, so the other funds is what you're referring to.
Yes.
So we don't,
We
Yeah.
do.
but I
We're
guess,
still working through that.
so in other words, some of these other funds specific to a certain thing, circles that can't be used for.
That's correct. And sometimes they come from general fund. So other
Right.
funds can include funds from the rest of the district.
Okay.
But they come from general fund and they are constrained by the budget year.
Okay.
Our e-builder system does not constrain things by the budget year. So we're talking about general fund. It's a change. So we figured out how to deal with it in our more current bond measures. But 2012 was kind of the first one.
Okay.
And so there's still some things. Okay, 2017. I know I say this every time, and there's a tiny little box up there that shows the percent spent, but I wanted to put that into context. So 79% spent, that's up 3% from the last time. What that actually means is that we spent $16.5 million in 2 months out of 2017 funds. Now, when we come to 2020, I'm going to tell you how much we spent in 2020 funds. And you'll get some perspective on just how much activity is occurring, particularly over the summer months as these bills start to roll in and move. So for the last time we reported out, which was data as of September 1st. So we're last report out to November 1st, which is the dates from on this report. That's this. You'll see that the MPG building is still on the report with a small amount of actuals today. We have a little bit left to transfer to the 2020 funds. Then once we do that, that line will go away. So it will only show up on the 2020 list. And I'm going to make that a little. And I think similar to this in the report last time, as far as our health and safety funds are concerned, we are looking at some of the what we call the health and safety programs or the categories of work where we have not needed as much funding as is allocated in order to complete the scope and so we're kind of assessing that. In particular, our water quality program, our lead paint program. Those are areas where we've additional funds that we are not going to work, and so we're going through and kind of doing an assessment. And as soon as we have a better sense of what that is, we'll have a full report on that. The intent behind the 2017 fund was that we would spend $150 million on health and safety. So to the extent we are not utilizing them on those particular categories of work, we will look to spend them on other health and safety categories. Roof replacements is a one. That is one where we have really an overwhelming amount of need. So that is probably going to be one we consistently to address using the responses.
The big under is on this high school.
So that what we are doing is we are showing a current estimated completion for Lincoln that is roughly 8 million. However, that 8 million, to put it into context, we are still in construction.
Oh, okay.
So while the building that you're sitting in right now looks and is incredibly finished and occupied, we are still working on the fields and the team. So until we complete phase 2 of the construction, we're not going to do anything with the additional.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking that, but you feel confident that your estimated completion is.
Our project manager feels very confident in that. Yes, no.
No. I don't- on the health and safety, 155. So that was the number that was originally established. Can that number be changed if there's surplus funds available in the future?
So the original number was 150,
Yeah,
and then we had a grant, OSIN, that added another 8 million, pretty much right at the very start of the measure. Um, we can certainly allocate other funds to health and safety projects. I think what I wanted to say is that we need to be sure that we spend at least 150.
yeah, understood, understood. Yeah. I'm just thinking, if you have a 8 million surplus. A lot of health safety stuff. Look at some of them. Health and safety.
We could, and it is, I'm sure as you expect, there are a lot of people who have thoughts about how we is those funds. You said that we're not bringing.
Yeah.
And so that's a push off the conversation.
And we had this conversation last time. Yeah, we're still working on what that process can look like, but still premature.
I think it's a little premature.
Yeah.
The 20 program. Okay, so I promised you I'd tell you how much we spent 2 months in the 2020 funding. We're at 11% complete, over 8% last time. That's $22.7 million spent in 2 months. The other two things together, we spent $39.2 million in 2 months. They would probably give you a good sense of just how much work this actually doing.
So that includes.
That is. So I'm not going to do a lot of conversation about the 2020 program. We are going to do presentations tonight on the 2020 infrastructure projects, 2020 capacity as well, and the Jefferson organization will be doing the presentation too. A couple other sort of general notes. The board did approve a settlement for construction. I'll report more on that next time. I don't have formal information. We are finalizing our audit report from last year. And it was a slightly larger set of materials to work with this year. It's last year. The report is a little bit longer. We are going to compensate for that by making this upcoming year slightly smaller, cost-wise and also material-wise. We will be hopefully providing the final report as a presentation. And we'll also are going to be at the board's facilities and operations meetings. That's Jefferson. And then last but not least, we are continuing to hire as many people as we can. Because when you're putting that much work on the ground. So we are currently interviewing for PM2s, which is kind of our mid-level of project manager. And we have now opened up for PM1s, which are entry-level project managers. And we're getting ready to start these videos. And we are going to start with capacity projects. And we're gonna start with Clark, and I think, Greg, you're gonna have some questions that probably only I can answer.
Okay.
So we'll let Clark do.
Well, when I ask you then. Because,
Yeah.
well, I sent it to you, so.
Yeah.
I just
Yes,
wanna-
and I think what we'll want to do is maybe let Clark just do a
That's fine.
presentation on the work itself and what's related to Hey, Clark, do you want to maybe come
I can do work.
sit here so that you would you like to hear lunch? Or maybe you can picture on the side. so that we members can see you.
Clark, Senior Project Manager. I am managing the two capacity projects that we have, Terwilliger and Harrison Park Fields conversion. Just kind of a quick overview as to where we are on the budget. Obviously, it's shows impacted. There's gonna be a lot of questions on around Harrison Park. As far as be a lot of questions. But I will kind of focus right now on the phase one aspect, which is what we did this summer, and we're still kind of finishing up on that work. That was focused on the cafeteria improvement and main office and the main entry improvement.
I
Yeah.
know where Harrison Park is.
Would that be 80s? division?
Oh, okay.
Am I getting that right? I go there a lot. I don't get really.
Southeast.
Yes. So yeah, the phase one of the project was just kind of some quick interior upgrades, as well as some non-conforming things that we had to do for the city. So there's a bike shelter being built right now. It's nearly done. We're waiting for material on that so they can diligently working throughout the school year. Stuff that we did accomplish this summer, some cafeteria upgrades. Kind of hard to see in these photos a little bit, but new ceiling, new lighting, new paints, and some acoustical panels to kind of change the feel of space a little bit. It's very nice. Still some flooring that needs to be completed, but we're gonna shift that into the second phase of the project. The main entry area, you can see in the picture on the right, we added some visibility. So those of you who've never been there, there used to be two brick walls, so the admin staff couldn't see anybody coming into the building. Now we've got kind of a service window and just like a full relight window, so they get a little more of the presence of people coming into the building. And then new flooring and new lighting in the space, which really drastically changed kind of the appearance of the room. And then the last piece is the admin office. Yeah. So just general city. So, you know, they're all new casework, new flooring, new lighting, anything. It's still lacking some furniture, which has been another supply chain issue. Just things are rolling in late. Hope to have all that completed by the end of the year. But those are kind of the general updates we did for the first phase of the project. The other piece would be, like I said, the bike shelter and our trash enclosure that's still being ready. As far as you want to talk about the budget thing afterwards on that? Okay. So, the other project associated with capacity is Terwilliger. Is now where the Access Academy is located. In planning area. That project here was substantially complete in August. We still have one or two more items, again, supply chain issues that are dragging on. So the intention is to have all that finished by Christmas and be over the winter break and be done with that. As far as the end of the construction outlay. If you look at equity numbers, as far as our consultants are really good. If we have same firm is doing both of these, which is Studio Tretti, on business. Same contractors are also doing the construction work and not so good. Again, low bid projects. We've asked them to make efforts that we've gone along. But it's kind of what the market bears. I can see is schedule wise, like I said, Terwilliger should be in December, Harrison Park. We have a few outside items we're doing, and obviously it shows designs, we're still continuing design for phase 2, which we intend to kind of get out bid in January. Be a much larger project for phase 2.
And we are looking at an alternative. Yep. So
Because
Short answer is it will provide us a little more control on our end because the project going to be done while school in session now. So we have a lot of moving parts in there that we're trying to figure out how to do to make this not drag out to 2027. Right. Yeah, I know when you hear the date in your head, it doesn't sound good. So we're hoping that we want to get a contract that we a little more comfortable with what they say for a schedule, what they're bringing in for a team. Safety and security is kind of a big thing. That they're going to be using the building all the time, and we're going to need to do some kind of movements for them so they can continue to work. So we also want to contact that want to be able to vet them on their capacity to be able to do that kind of work. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it involves a full mechanical project as well, which we want to make sure that we bring on a mechanical contractor that can handle mechanical work and phasing, because it's also a little complicated. Occupied building there is going to be very right.
So to give a little background on the capacity funds in general, there was not a specific set of projects that were identified for capacity. There were some things that were kind of in mind when that number was put on the bond measure. We knew that there were going to be changes related to school enrollment. So as enrollment changes in schools, sometimes we have to make changes to the schools themselves to address the capacity issues. So we kind of knew that that was something that we have struggled to find funding for in the past. We put that on the bond measure. We didn't necessarily have specific scope of work defined. The two projects that came up that were very clearly related to enrollment and capacity issues. There was no question that these were things. With Harrison Park in particular, as we got into it, this was related to converting Harrison Park from elementary to a middle school as part of the Southeast Lighting Coalition Park. So converting from an elementary school to a middle school is pretty significant. The changes are pretty significant. And I think we knew fairly quickly that the money that we had left in the funding was not going to be enough to do this work. Harrison Park also had a lot of needs. And when you're starting to talk about making fairly significant changes to address ed specs for middle school, the kinds of things that need, then you start asking the question, how much are we putting in now that we would then redo later? And would that push off redoing to a different point in time? Would we be better off to do more now to last longer with more stuff? So in some ways, it's a bit, we're treating it as a bit of a test project of how are we able to modernize, we call it a mini modernization, an existing school, make some pretty substantial changes without the full cost of a modernization. So really keeping more interiors, keeping more existing walls, keeping more finishes, but still really refreshing, addressing systems that are failing, which in this case includes the mechanical system. And we have funding in the 2020 bond for mechanical improvements. We already anticipated using the full system replacements on the handful of schools. Harrison Park is one of the school systems. As we are already doing this project, while we'll be doing pretty significant changes, it made sense to combine the two things. So we have a substantial chunk of funding that is coming from the mechanical. Which one of your questions here in just a minute. You'll see a big amount of that is actually sitting in what's called the other funds up there. On the mechanical page, I did something a little sneaky, right? Which is to say, I didn't want to be too confusing and too like alarmist of, hey, we're way over budget on two different facet and mechanical. I only showed you the mechanical funds for Harrison Park on the mechanical page. It didn't show you the full budget. And in the notes, I just referenced, please look at the capacity project status page to get more information. So we want to try to track Harrison Park under the capacity page, but it's not just going to have mechanical funds. It is also going to be utilizing some funds from the 2020 security because we're going to do the work we would have done with 2020 security funds at Harrison Park. We'll do it through this project instead of doing it through separate. So we'll be seeing that work will be the ADA improvements. That would be part of the 2020 ADA scope of work. That will be done through this project as well. So we'll bring those funds in for the specifics. And we're going to track it all through the 2020 capacity. But we're going to make sure you can see it on each of the pages so you know where those funds go in each of those different.
So if I look at $28 million, the only reason that I didn't have an issue with any of it, I mean, I know you guys go through, you figure out something else. You brought in $12 million of other funds from somewhere else. You only had $4 million more from the bonds. That all makes sense. But then I saw the estimated completion was $28 million, which is 11.4 over the current budget. But if I'm hearing you correctly, that 28 includes 11.5 from the mechanical on that other page.
It does. And it includes the security work and it includes the ADA work.
So why didn't you change the current budget from 16,575 to 28?
We haven't transferred all the funds in. That's why it just sits as an estimated completion. Once we transfer the funds in that point, budget change. Those funds are sitting elsewhere.
So if we're trying to track how you're doing relative to your budget, I guess that's my job. Do we need even, I mean, it's good we have the information on the mechanical page, but really this page here, we need to be watching, right?
Yes. We need
Yeah, well, thank you.
It's not unlike what you did with health and safety. Funds from a multitude of different sources. So it's real hard to track, I recall, because, well, I didn't just do this, again, this. This is covered out of that fund. So you have the same thing going on here, essentially what you're saying. But in this case, rather than have us try to figure all that out, eventually roll those numbers in and just say capacity includes, and then move the funds out accordingly, so it's an easy thing to follow and manage.
And the way we've got these set up within these projects, when you look at the category that says funding, so it's budget first and then funding. When you look at funding, you'll see capacity funds and other funds. Those may be other bond funds, right?
So other funds?
Yeah, other bond funds will be the mechanical, will be
Right.
the technology. The capacity funds will stay in the capacity side. The other funds will show up.
So the question is, how do you roll it all up into your one budget? And all these pieces. Eventually these will be adjusted so that Harrison Park, for example, on the campus is going to go away.
No, we're going to continue to show it somewhere or another. And I don't know yet if we're going to do it on that mechanical sheet, but I am looking at whether we can create a report similar to the 2017 health and safety funding allocation report. So that report, which is in your packets, as always, that report breaks out by funding source what is allocated to different projects. So you may see a project show up on multiple funding sources, but it actually just categorizes groups and by a funding source. We may try to do that for the infrastructure funding as well, to make it a little bit easier to track how much we've spent out of bucket of money. I'm still working at how I can do that. I started doing the steps, but really trying to get there, but there's a little more background work on it.
So why does this, the summary say 2020 mechanical totals?
It actually is supposed to say 2020 capacity totals, and I was,
Okay.
That's a good
I
question.
noticed that earlier too. I'm sorry. Well, we provided you, I think, with several reports.
It gives us something to ask questions about.
Yeah. I'm glad you're touching these things.
Okay, got it then.
Other questions about capacity, or can we? Go ahead and,
Yeah,
okay, yeah. I knew that was gonna take us a little bit of time, so, we are going to bring. Steve Simonson. Is coming up for. The roof projects.
Easier.
Oh, there it is.
Any questions?
And we have, this is the budget and other pages. Really change.
Sure, so budgets, as you can see, we. Our project budgets are loaded all the way through for projects through next summer. We're currently showing after the end of next summer. About 10 million remaining, so that will probably be. Two, possibly 3 smaller roofs for summer 2024. One thing to note is that several of the routes that are shown for kind of towards the bottom of this are potentially 2 roof or 2 summer or more projects based off of phasing. Overall, I think we're doing well on budget. We are definitely seeing price increases across the board, labor and materials that are affecting our schedule. This past summer, we completed Ainsworth Annex, Cesar Chavez, most of Glencoe, almost all of Ricky. There are a few portions of the Glencoe route, the Ricky route, that as we broke into the second phase for next summer due to material availability. That is another issue that we're seeing on many of these projects is long lead times on the materials, such as the rigid foam insulation. Then something that's been nagging at us. Not really too much.
This is a good one. The original budget.
No sneaky things.
Yeah, things and roots.
You see is what you get. All right. Are we okay to move on to seismic? Thank you, Steve.
I'm Robert Scholl, Senior Manager, and I've been responsible for the seismic budget and projects as of late. Lent is one of 2 that we just finished up this summer. Actually, so we finished it up. We are still in punch list trying to get that budget. That came in right around 6.5 mil. I'm doing that by memory because I can't read that for myself. It's not that good. Okay. 7.5 mil, my mistake. And then the creative sciences GP, we did phase 1 this summer. Excellent contractor, came out really good, came out on time. Yes, we had some fine tuning issues as well. So waiting on a few components that we were able to install. Great. That also came in about 7.5 mil. We'll be doing phase 2 beginning, actually working what we can now. We'll get it hard and heavy the 1st of June. That site, from what I understand, will be occupied by the current students that are at Harrison Park. Everybody moves out. Also exploring, and that's currently not up there.
We
So
are,
what you're adding, you know, 7 million.
We have 7 million left over. We actually, we're doing all of the background, calculations. And design work in order to apply for the next round of SRG. We are doing that work on 2 schools. We don't know what we'll be putting forward in the application process. It's highly likely we would put forward both. But we're unlikely to get 2 grants. And so we also need to think about prioritization. We can't really make that sort of prioritization until we have all the information from the applications, because it's going to tell us a little bit more about the extent of the design that's necessary and what it looks like cost wise to do that. So we need to kind of see where that fits. So we should have more information on that at the next meeting as well.
So your grant was the other funds, right?
Yes,
And the stipend fund.
the seismic funds are from the 2020 measure.
Okay.
And then we received grants of 2.5 million. That is the maximum that they're giving out. We've been very, very fortunate that they've given us that. 4 times in a row. So we're incredibly grateful. The ability to match that with our system. Really allows us.
Refresh my memory, what level of seismic improvements are we making?
Media.
Both these schools are meeting, our schools are meeting up.
That is what we're striving for, yes. That has reached that.
Oh, that's right.
I'll say the creative science has reached out once we can.
Wow. Kudos.
You heard a question?
And some projects.
You know what, 11 million of it's going.
We do.
On that, yes.
So our mechanical projects, all 3 of the current projects are in design. The Bridger project, we're actually going to bid next week. Will be is our bid date for that one. We've got some pretty good interest that we've seen from the contracting community, so we'll see out in about a week. It was originally, the bid date was originally scheduled for this Thursday, but we got requests from some contractors to push it out 1 week, just due to the holiday getting good quotes. So that's where that one is at. Schedule wise, budgeting. Let's go. Budgeting, again, these budgets are current estimated budgets. It is entirely possible that this may come back higher than that. These are very complex projects where we're opening up the ceilings and mechanical spaces of all these buildings and doing pretty significant renovation spread over multiple summers with a lot of complicated factors.
So you're not super confident. Maybe that's
Very early.
The complicating factor of the city of having to work with the city of Portland and some of our early permitting. They essentially told us, hey, if you're going to go through mechanical upgrades, you need to go do fire sprinkler upgrades. So we're working hand in hand with EPS. The amicable solution to essentially not do full fire sprinkler upgrades. We're in discussions with them on what that. Well, they don't exist.
Oh, well, that would be.
I think each school is a slightly different situations. Here we have some schools that have corridors. In corridors, but may have common areas. It's just really a mix. Each school is a little different. So we've not been required to upgrade all of the school stuff. Of course, our alarm systems happened there were through well 2017. In sort of close coordination.
This kind of makes, this strikes me as one problem I have for the dress would be a partial model of potential building. And, and so I'm wondering, do you have a sense of how many of the potential things like this could be coming up with? Let's be back about.
Yes, those things change regularly. So we get new triggers all the time and we don't always. So, obviously, I think as he said, the team really had an early conversation with the city.
Yeah.
And that was the point where they started understanding how this is gonna be. You are having regular discussions. We'll see. Upon is that we get the greatest use of our funds for the highest level of safety for the most of their students. Those are goals to improve safety.
Curious, what your contracting strategy is for. If one could argue the same arguments. Or the same arguments can be made for all those other mechanical systems, so are you considering? Are we looking at one contractor? I'm just curious.
We definitely are having those conversations, I think. So we didn't really get too far into schedule, but as part of the conversations around the spring, with the city, we've come up with some proposals that are a little bit different in each of the projects. As part of that, two of the projects we're going to push back another year. And that is also going to give us time to think about our company strategy. The two that are being done this upcoming summer are Harrison Park, really and Bridger, which will not be doing this regular updates. So it's going to move a little bit less. The two that are basically be complicated about them.
For limitation.
So when we do an alternative contract, we are anticipating that Harrison Park will be here in front of the court. Of course, there's a process of the rule. I think there's a public hearing. And a notification has already been published. Go through all that first and then you can sort for approval.
I can't imagine getting a lot of backlash. Don't like it.
That's very true. Most of the mechanical contractors that we heard from, most of them you will for the CMGC kind of build.
Okay.
I think that came all the way through.
All right.
Thank you.
Let's talk about security.
Yes.
So as you can see, we're all green, we're all good.
That's it.
So we're in the early phases of this project, see right now, we're in design.
We're gonna be phasing the work, 3 phases. We're already school, phase 1, obviously. So yeah, currently we're in design for school group 1. Kind of phase it, well, we'll do the design, construction, and then while that's going on, we'll start the design for phase 2, and then construction will start design for phase 3. And then construction for phase
What's the $20 million? You've got,
But we're only in design.
So we've only.
so why would you need it now instead of?
Because I require them. Before I put it in the top.
So,
I see.
It is still there, it's still waiting, but there is a design work. So part of the design work, you know, they really have to go through and assess, make sure they understand the scope of the work at every single site in the school district. So as they go through and do all of that assessment, then they will come up with
This
a
thing
scope
keeps
of work.
growing. So far, you've only identified stuff.
That is correct. The hardware upgrades, I'm just gonna set that aside because we're actually doing that in coordination with our 2020 EDA. And that project manager will talk about that separately. But for just the security cameras and the intrusion, what you see there is in project for design. And then as we scope the work, we will allocate funds for the.
you said this will be phase 2, so. Potential multiple contracts over multiple years. This sounds like a. Rules embedded in this or not? 40, 80, okay.
So it's more like a contract that we're still. That procurement strategy, and in large part, it depends on this as soon as possible.
This is a big time roll up.
Yeah,
Well, it
basically.
is because all it shows you right now is that it's not real.
Yeah, that's,
Not real good.
yeah,
Yes, sorry, yes.
okay.
You understand?
And now, we'll go ahead. You're okay.
Everything is good.
It's all great. There you go. I'll talk about something.
So it's EDA and all.
Hi, Ellie Fusen, project manager for ADA and SPED. And ADA is essentially 4 projects. ADA is better, essentially 4 projects. 3 of them are ADA. The first one is signage. We broke it out separately because permitting required. Started installing signage about 3 weeks ago. We hope to have it be done summer, but issues. Getting material was difficult for our fabricator. So they are expecting to be completed with that by the end of December. I'm gonna get into it in January. They tend to think that they can really go fast. The next part is the hardware upgrades. So that's a combination of accessibility and security. And we pulled that out of the ADA architectural work. Security happened sooner than we would have done it if we had it in with the architectural work. So we're replacing doorknobs with levers in classrooms that are lockable from the inside to open the room and lock the door with the key. So that'll happen in all classrooms. And rooms where more than 2 or 3 people gather regularly. So like the main office, the faculty room, places like that. And then for the common areas that have exit devices or panic bars, we're gonna install new panic bars that have thumb turns with an indicator that says this door is locked, turn it on. That's required for egress. So installation on the first group of schools started today at Route Elementary, and We anticipate that the bulk of the work will be done before the end of the year. We've run into a few sites that have some doors that may have hazardous materials. And for those sites that the assessors identified the bulk of the doors are hazardous, we're gonna have them tested. And for those doors where there are 6 or fewer doors, we're just gonna assume that they're dirty and replace them. So that may add to our schedule, getting those and to the budget. Yes,
Where will that show up?
it hasn't shown up because we haven't gotten any pricing from them yet. And for the hardware, about 35% of that is covered by ADA funds, and the rest of it is covered with security funds.
88 funds are bond measure, they got some separate. No.
They are the bond measure.
Yes. Because the ADA only called for main level upgrades, and so we're using security funds to deal with the non-level door hardware swaps.
We have to do. It didn't make sense for us to run these as separate projects. They're touching the same. Right, so. We basically just combined it. We've identified what. Percentage of it is really a security based upgrade. What percentage is based upgrade. And we're split funding it.
Original budget is 34 million. Current budget's 42 million. Coming in 11 million.
So the current budget includes both the ADA funds and the other funds,
So that's
right?
what-
So that is on the hardware upgrades, those other funds are for security. On the ADA and sped upgrades, which is the next one that she's gonna talk about, those other funds are for the sped.
So the ADA main level upgrades. We started with, I went out and assessed our document that tells us all the things we need to fix and made sure that those things needed to be fixed at schools, and noted other things that, well, this isn't on the list, but this should be fixed too. We started working with Planning and Design in August of this year to design all of the upgrades at 80 sites. It's broken into 2 phases. The first phase schools are our Title I TSI, CSI focus option schools. And then the phase 2 schools are those schools that don't have a designation. We anticipate getting the phase 1 schools started over the summer. We're gonna break it up into phases at each site where the work that is more disruptive will happen over the summer. And work that is less disruptive will happen during the school year. So installing handrails and doing exterior concrete ramps and things like that, or aluminum ramps. Those will happen when the students are in the building. Some of the more disruptive work includes part of what is coming out of the SPED budget, and that is SPED specific restrooms for the intensive skills classrooms. A lot of students have more intensive toileting needs and need more space and bigger bathrooms than what are available at many of the schools. So that's where that extra money from SPED comes.
Which I just went ahead and moved us to the sped. Greg, if you're following along, the ADA and sped upgrades line,
Yeah,
Those
you
things
will
remind you
see the
Yeah.
numbers are
how big it
flipped
is.
on sped than they were
So
for
they're one and
ADA.
the same, each line is actually the same. line.
Yes,
Got
About it.
yeah.
it. Okay.
I know.
It's
I'll figure
29.
it out.
Okay, all right, good.
We have to come up with this term for that.
And this is how we're gonna be talking about it for the next 3 years, so. We're there.
All right.
First time on it.
Not for me anymore.
Okay.
We'll explain it again next.
So, do you want to talk about the
Sure, so Sped. It covers the intensive skills restrooms. And then the bulk of our sped budget is going to be spent on furniture. For all focus for all focus classrooms and learning centers. It's essentially 160 classrooms at 80 sites across the district. We started working with a consultant last fall who met with SPED leadership and both from BAM and OSM. And they did some good workshops where they were able to come up with some ideas and put together some solutions for the different types of classrooms. We are starting with a pilot installation in December in 6 classrooms, elementary school and a middle school focus room, an elementary and middle school learning center, and a sensory space. We're going to install those over the winter break. SPED staff will then be invited to come and assess the furniture and provide feedback, as well as those teachers using the furniture. And we'll use, family use that to inform to write an ed spec specifically for SPED classrooms. And once that's written, we'll go out and we'll start outfitting all the other classrooms. Anticipate being done at the end of 2020. Thank you.
So I just flashed up the adjourn. Don't like that as anything.
Well, we're waiting for Jefferson.
We are going to do Jefferson. We're actually going to run Jefferson off of a different laptop. So there's going to be a little bit of
Okay.
transition here. Because they're not part of Marie's policy. So. Take just a quick few minutes. to get that.
Things up.
Sorry. I
I'll serve you a lot.
I thought they were okay. All right, thank you.
They will. I don't know why we do security. No, no.
Okay.
Yeah, no, no.
They might have done something. Someone's mom.
That's why the camera.
All right. So- We have any excuses?
We do, we've got a couple, I don't know all that, we've got a couple, we can send out the application. We've got a couple on the hook that look pretty good.
Okay.
We are looking to maybe try and attract some more diverse candidates. So I think the hope is to have a couple new ones. for January, and then leave some room for some other more intentional outreach.
Perfect.
It is.
Okay. Ready, already. You guys can. The teacher library, one of the project managers was Jefferson High School modernization.
Steve Efros, another one of the project managers. for the job.
Let's start off with the date and acknowledgement and profession statement. At PPS, we strive to strengthen our relationship with the Native community and Native nations. A symbol of this commitment is a land acknowledgement. These statements bring visibility to the purpose of our collective home. This statement is meant to provide information for context about the relationship with Native people and Native experiences. We acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional land of the Chinook, Goodness, Ophia, Multnomah, Pasco, Quebec, Wellington. We also know that many other tribes made their homes along the Columbia and Milwaukee River. We honor their history and acknowledge the sacrifice that they made. Let us also acknowledge the federal recognized tribes of this area, Myron, Siletz, and Cowlitz. In addition, I'd like to acknowledge the Chinook Nation, which has been seeking federal recognition for many years. The urban Indian communities in the diversity that originates
Urban Indian community has a vivid history there. Today, these tribes and communities celebrate their heritage, showing resilience and tenacity, greatly admired by their ancestors. Within Portland Public Schools today, we serve students and families representing more than 150 different tribal nations within our education system. It is our obligation to teach accurate information, past and present, of the impact of colonization on students. Students today, all students today, and make visible the multitude of native families and many diverse ways, native communities and families. Encourage every person to reflect on their own history, understand the history of colonization and genocide, and support Indigenous sovereignty priorities. This acknowledgement is one step that we can take to support Indigenous communities and needs. In addition to acknowledging land and those in here since time began, we must also remember our stolen siblings from Africa who bravely built the vast wealth of this country. These and the atrocities committed against them are intrinsically intertwined with our existence in a white supremacist world. Everything we have is due to stolen land and stolen labor. It impacts our lives and builds upon this legacy. It is our job to speak that truth into spaces so that we can go.
So we wanted to, give you a high level kind of overview of the project at this point, starting with community engagement and feedback that are pretty substantial part. Go over the recommended concept that we have landed on for the years. And then talk about how this project compares to patients, and finally kind of go over a high level schedule, both the work that we've done and so wanted to start with this diagram. It was actually kind of developed in response to questions that we've gotten about this. I think for Jefferson and actually for most modernization projects, there are a lot of inputs and places that we get engagement from the community and from stakeholders overall. So this was, I think, a very helpful diagram to kind of show what we call the who, how, and what of that engagement, and also how that kind of changes from the planning process through design. So I'll give one example because it's come up today in today's presentation, and that is under community engagement. You can see on the left-hand side, there's parents, students, families, alumni, neighbors. At the very top, there's a CPC or Comprehensive Planning Committee and DAC, which is Design Advisory Group. And the CPC in particular is the group that we've been working with. And so they have been providing detailed feedback that you can see the what into that planning process, which is obviously at kind of a high level, looking at the site layout, program locations, and kind of overall approach. So this is yet another way that we're trying to kind of explain again the complexity of that engagement process, but focusing largely on these stakeholder groups, Jefferson's specific stakeholder groups you can see below, PPS stakeholder groups, which you can actually see your name there on accountability committee in blue, public engagement overall, which again includes CPC, but also a whole other group of different kind of communities that we engage with, and then certainly the regulatory agencies as well. So we've had contact with multiple different groups of high school community members, alumni, families, neighbors, school partners, regulatory agencies, and they've all had kind of a say in kind of what ultimately gets built at Jefferson. Obviously, also bringing in board members, CBSE, Black Student Excellence Leadership. And you can also just see it's a little small, but kind of all the documents and events that can relate to each of those. So again, not to overwhelm you, but that's kind of the big picture of our process. I would say again, overall on modernization projects, but I would say even more so on Jefferson.
So this is really kind of a condensing of the process we've been going through with the comprehensive plan, which is starting at the very beginning, coming up with all modern vision to come up with, which is a mission statement and then a set of guiding principles. And this really focused on, again, guiding how we want to guide the, or how the community wants to guide the process, the cultural experience of the school program. And impossible to read, but a lot of it is really our ideas that we have discussed at this point, but we'll continue to kind of modify and adapt as we go through the process, working both CPC and also with BAC. Yeah. So again, if we had Ayana here, she is probably much better at explaining kind of the deep community engagement that we've been doing. She's been really embedded in this process, but this is a great kind of overview, particularly of the work that she working closely with co-locate, which is our engagement and design justice, open working with the design team. And so really through their efforts, and they have actually their own dedicated group of what we call community design organizers or CDOs. They participated in over 600 stakeholder discussions and over 700 comments, and continue to increase that over time into the design phase. But it also really focuses on what we call priority users. Those are stakeholders who have been disproportionately marginalized and can advocate for and have access to resources. So it's not, I think for our team, in particular to co-locate, it's not looking at everyone kind of on an even plane. Elevating those who really want to prioritize. So this is helpful, and actually I would encourage you, because I found this amazing. This really takes all of the community engagement, comments, and feedback, and really kind of distills it into these what we call narrative themes. So I would encourage you, if you have time, kind of read through the text in each of those, but I'll kind of give you a high level kind of overview of each one. So it really kind of talks about people's, how they're impacted by this project, including their concerns, their considerations and experiences, but it also looks for opportunities for things that people are most excited about. So the first theme is trust, and it really focuses obviously on the impact on BIPOC communities through district policy. So what's been the history of what's happened in BPS and in New Jefferson? It focuses on, the next one focuses on identity, cultural, and belonging. Really, again, focusing on Jefferson as a cultural institution for Black and Brown communities historically. Another theme is safety, security, and wellness. Focuses on both physical and mental health. Access, which again, I think comes up a lot of projects, the importance of universal design and access. Flexibility and change, allowing for dynamic use of Jefferson now and into the future. Another theme is on resources, which is focused both on educational resources, but also sociocultural resources, all the programs that Jefferson works with. Delight, which I think is a great kind of theme. It talks about the wonder and inspiration and how people interact with schools. And then embracing the outdoors focuses both on the connections to the outdoor environment, but also on the importance of indoor environmental quality. So this jumps right into basically the recommended option for Jefferson, culminated edible. And unfortunately, you don't see the plan quite yet, but in a few slides, you'll understand what this is referring to. But the idea is that retaining the original 1909 building in Jefferson.
That got changed.
It did.
You got cupolas.
Yeah, and that's a big part of the discussion, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But certainly people's connection to Jefferson has been really important. It's not just the kind of architectural connection, but it's kind of the cultural connection to the building. So we've gotten a lot of feedback, different avenues that you've seen, but also we did kind of a targeted survey about some earlier options, several options that we asked people to rate. And that we've really seen that based on that feedback, that retaining this 1909 building has really been the overwhelming. And I think per your comment, the other caveat I wanted to add is that Jefferson High School actually lies within the Piedmont Conservation District. So it's considered a contributing resource even with all those changes to that historic district. So the city has a lot of influence over this process, but we've actually started to get their feedback through meetings with them. And we've actually found that they've been very obviously important to keep. So really, part of what we found both through the feedback we received on this project, but also through prior bond work, is that they're kind of driving factors during the planning process, and they kind of vary in importance and kind of categorized in this way. But you know, some of these driving forces include obviously needing square footage for spec requirements for high schools. Another important one that we've learned about is not having travel distances. In other words, you know, be any longer than any other modernization project, and that's been, I think, focus certainly. And really cut down some of those travels. Really looking for the simplest phasing as possible so that we can minimize impact on staff. Really focusing on getting existing students in new classrooms by 2026. That's the phasing approach, and keeping them on site during construction. Having all construction completed by 2028. Having a range of athletic facilities, including track and field, practice fields, and also a multi-use field in the South Block, which is the South parcel, south of Alberta. And then overarching all of this, you can see in green is really that this project should reflect the feedback. So again, this was a way to kind of explain to the community and others how these different factors. And yet another, I'm just finding so many different ways to explain this. And honestly, it's because we get a lot of questions. Because it's a complex process, and particularly from the CPC members who know they understand they have an important role, but it just helps them in context. But this actually kind of rounds it a little bit more, just really in the overall site layout of Jefferson. So this is basically the existing Jefferson, but kind of focuses on certain aspects of it. The track and field really has to remain in use during finding a way to maintain that. Again, looking at the simplest phasing, and it points to kind of different aspects of the program, but keeping classrooms and administrative functions functioning during the dance studios and Jefferson has now a dance program. They would obviously prefer to stay remain open until new dance studios are built, as well as the theater and arts wing and the surgery. And obviously the new build, the initial phase.
So did you make a determination at one point we heard a presentation that you would either stay in the new building or the building behind it, or it's the building in front of it? So you made a decision. Still to come. Okay, well, I was describing it. I thought that
It's
you'd be
helping guide.
your guy. I think.
So yeah.
It's a presentation, right?
There's only three of them. Make it up when you have a class, right?
I'll hand it out.
So to answer your question,
I'm sorry. I'm guiding them.
all of the engagement that Steve had mentioned and the analysis has resulted in our recommended. So in this option, as mentioned here, and building, and eventually throughout phasing, I'll describe shortly, will demolish all the rest of the buildings on the site. And all the additions will go to the south. building and well as functional. Mostly. This slide begins to give a feeling of the overall site design. As mentioned, very important to the community to remain. We are still doing a bit of investigating on ability on modifying the existing names there to provide universal access directly from the trail. And proposing, we're also proposing calls. There will be plazas, spaces, gathering for student staff. We are striving to preserve the little trees where the possible in clay fields towards the south. In the southwest of the main line in Ross. So this slide is one of the most important that conveys our work with the comprehensive planning committee and the community at large. It articulates how our plan is already beginning to respond to that rich engagement. Important concepts that came out of that have come out of that work, such as retaining building the track, creating entry plazas that provide gathering spaces and security, and a state-of-the-art performance and athletic facilities. And parking is also a big thing for a lot of our stakeholders. We will continue to examine opportunities. So the next few slides break down the phasing. So this is the current school site plan. The initial impact to the site would be minimal. It would pretty much just be for athletics to give up that south baseball field and shifting practice to across Alberta on most southern lot that and the current baseball field would be inaccessible. And as we begin phase one construction, students would remain in the current building for classes, and almost all of the current Jefferson program would remain in place as well. The only demo that would occur in phase one, or at least very early in phase one, would be the existing auto shop building, which is a small building on the sort of southeastern side of along Commercial, so that we can make way for the new buildings to the south. So that building would include enough classrooms for common enrollment, the performing arts theater and supporting studio spaces, as well as the survey and conference. We'd also be building the new grandstand and updating the traffic field in this phase, and having the existing main gym remain functional until phase two and the new gym are complete. Phase two, we would move the students from the existing building into that white model, which is now complete. And then we would demolish all of the rest of the buildings between the 1909 building and that new addition to which would include like the current theater and cafeteria, the old gym, all the spaces that need to remain functional during. So we would move the students over to the new and abate and remodel the interior of 1909 and then build new connecting spaces, bridging the new city walls, which would include potentially extending a larger commons, additional classrooms, having spaces in the two new gyms. In this scheme, we envision the ground levels to serve athletics. So that larger sort of rectangular module, yellow module would be where the main gyms are. So we envision the ground floors of at least the western portion of the existing buildings also house athletics. So we would have a very nice connection with the main gyms, connecting its athletics programming on the ground floor of the 1909, connecting both fields to the north end. So the better connection. these diagrams present a first look at the potential interior organization of the new Jefferson High School. The first floor would contain mostly all the admin and public facing spaces. The main entry would be on commercial, and access to the theater would be had from that space as well. You move west through that entry into the central common, facing to the main gym grounds, which would have access both. Original building to the north would house that athletic programming to provide that connection. To the whole field of the north and south. The second floor would allow visibility down into the commons and interior courtyard, below which we would be maintaining. It was original and we would actually put. Yeah. The second floor would also house the activity gym as well as the media center. Third and fourth floors would have primary investment spaces with plenty of daylight. You can kind of discern that with the forms of the buildings as they're coming together. And views out to the green roofs and lobbies. So this slide articulates our early 2019 consumption master plan did prior to 2021. Recommended Jefferson as offered 27 with additional space in key areas. But the key ones being creating a larger theater to accommodate 1,000 seats, which is double the 500 that's in current spec. As well as a significant added support space for the pre-X program, the claim dam program, which is what generates the desire for the larger theater. We must also accommodate additional space beyond spec for robust creative partnerships. Finalized square footage area programs with various stakeholders going on since July. And we will continue to the schematic. We will continue that work into the schematic and design development. These meetings have the district staff as well as Jefferson staff. And once Drake Shelton, the new principal, was in place, we began having so this schedule gives you a broad sort of backload view of snapshot of kind of where we are right now. The planning for the project began in 2019. First, we gave had us develop slope schedule budget for the Jefferson for the 2021, the budget for 2021. And as you can see, we're sort of at the end right now of our planning phase. And we're putting the last touches on it. Which will mark the beginning of the sign. Several months. All of it, we are planning to continue. This slide is a little bit more gritty, telling the story of design and construction. So we will need to deliver this project. This is as mentioned, which will necessitate 2 sets. Document packages, process steps for permitting and value engineering exercises and processes. We will have a condensed schedule in order to accommodate the phase 1. Which are this slide lists those crucial milestone phase 5. So you completed planning in December. And we then move into schematic design early next year, after board approval. Design development, construction documents will follow that, starting in next May of next year, and we are projecting to move into that first profitable summer 2026. Remainder of the we did. Sure.
I am curious about what's considered the front of the building. I'm looking at your plans and so is it the front that goes over, looking over the track? Or was it Alberta? Or?
Well, depends who you ask.
Oh.
I mean.
You guys see now?
But
Well, I mean, when you, in your proposal.
Where's the?
the main entry will be on, commercial. As,
That's a side street.
sorry, that's the, oh, go back.
First Street.
to-
Yeah, I think I got all, I couldn't see what.
There you go. Well, can't really see much there. The one before it is, yeah, that's,
So right there on the left.
yeah, on the right.
Oh, that's.
The floor plan shows like the entry lobby
There's a
and
little-
area.
Right to the southeast of the main building, right there, there will be an entry courtyard space there.
I mean, you did say that, I just didn't get it.
Yeah,
Because the building goes this way.
It does.
The doors,
if you're driving along Killingsworth, it looks like the front is
Okay,
there, like that's what it is now.
yeah.
And that impression will also remain. Depending upon what happens.
In many ways, how Franklin was for
Yeah.
almost 100
Right,
years.
it's on, yeah.
Right.
It's not so easy. Riverside.
Right.
I was done, so.
You done?
I'm.
So much work.
So, last time we. Discussed, one of them was the contract. I didn't see anything in here. As how that's gonna play out. I'm assuming you're still planning the same contract. And how it's being designed, it begs the question, how are you gonna negotiate? So I was curious that changed any of your thinking, or, I mean, you're still charging ahead, I'm assuming, but it just seems like that's an important piece that you may want to consider incorporating into your schedule, so you can kind of understand how that comes together.
Let's do slide 24.
So it's in there.
It is. Those stars indicate, that's all right.
We will be providing this, and upload it to the.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
It'll
you.
be much more
Yes.
legible.
Right.
But yes, the stars indicate strategies. So we anticipate getting pricing. We have a very compressed SB period, and we actually talked to design team today about how the sets would work, most likely. The stuff today would probably be going off 100% SB set with DNP. But we are still planning all the scheduling of all of them.
Or if it's that.
No problem.
Then the second question is, you haven't done any preliminary budgets for the three schemes. Now you're gonna set a budget based on the one. you landed on.
Yes, I mean, that's actually in process. We have a draft cost estimate that we're, so, yes.
They did take cost estimates for the two. Versions. The one that they're. Mandate, we are working through.
Yeah, okay, I figured you had. I was expecting the number. Trying to figure out how it plays out. So there will be, will there be an opportunity to say, the recommended estimate for recommended cost for the is thus, had we done the other two, they would have cost this. Were you gonna do any comparison like that, or is it, no, we're just gonna go with what we, the recommendation, and we don't really care if there were cost differences between the other options.
Cost difference is the only factor. And so I think in some ways it's misleading to say you could make a decision based on cost alone. And there are other factors that actually have more impact. And one of the impacts has to do with the historic
Again,
building and the ability to do the other options based on that land use. So I think the writing is on the wall that in order to get the land use approved, we are having to keep at least the 19 building. Because the city essentially said, unless you have overwhelming support from the community to demolish this building, you're probably not going to be able to. And what that does is it sort of coalesces the fact that we actually had overwhelming support from the community to keep the 19 building. So those two things kind of came together, providing cost information from an option that it doesn't actually seem viable.
for that, thank you, that helps
But
clarify.
are we still staying in our 300? Well, I know, that's.
That was interesting, and I think, I'm gonna say in fairness, when we first started putting together the budgets for the 2021 measure, those numbers were right as the pandemic was starting. And escalation in particular is probably the biggest issue that I see on the budget, in large part because I think we talk a lot about how we came up with those numbers, and the fact that our escalation numbers, we went to 3 different cost estimators. We talked through what all 3 of those cost estimators gave us, and none of them felt very comfortable with what they were forecasting. In fact, one of them refused to forecast very far at all. And what we found is what they gave us has been thrown out of the way.
And I guess that part I understand. You've done a tremendous community involvement. I know that when these projects got in the community, wind up getting all sorts of things that, so how much did that change? You think that's changed the 311 million? Not the escalated, those parts, did we change? You think much?
No.
Good.
Yeah. We've actually, the conceptual master plan anticipated 300,000 square feet, and we are currently at 330. Right. So I feel pretty good about us staying on. I really think our biggest issue is.
Trying to remember, I remember in the past, you treated the escalation differently. Right, that was the first one.
I think you may be thinking about how when we cost estimated for
2020.
the bond,
Yeah.
where we had multiple master plans and we had different design teams and
Yeah.
cost estimators. And what we said was to estimate to current dollars, and then you apply uniform escalation. So different teams didn't apply different rates. And then we just specified what our rates were per year and how we compound.
But the question is the escalation embedded in the 311 million? Second line item.
The escalation is embedded in the 311 million. And then, of course, we have program contingency in addition.
Because I think we did it, if you did it differently, I think that well.
I think that's right. Yeah. Yes, it was definitely different in 2012. We didn't have independent cost estimates then too. That was more of dollars per square foot.
Right.
Times a student square footage.
And I remember you briefing us on the Jefferson. I think it was before the bottom out.
Mhm.
You briefed the BAC. You remember that?
Mhm.
And so we could go back and kind of look at that.
We do, yeah, we've got all that documentation, because we did the,
Oh, and I remember we were pretty tight on the escalation.
Well, we were.
We wanted more.
we had a separate memo on cost escalation we could decide.
That's reminded of that conversation.
No, I remember.
Well,
Pull up my notes. if
yeah,
you'd like.
well, we got a separate memo on it. We can bring that back to life.
I would say, I mean, you still have a pretty healthy contingency in the 2020 program, or program protected fee. So it's not like not like what Jefferson or what Benson did.
It's healthy and the risk is different.
Yeah.
And,
Well, my sense, it's not gonna be, yes, it's probably gonna go up a bit, and for, they'll do your due diligence to justify why. But the good news is we don't have a situation like we did then, where the bond is solid, rock solid, they're not gonna bust it. So that's how I'm looking.
I think it's fair.
Good job.
That's all we have for tonight.
Thank you.
Great.
You're gonna put these slides on the.
We will, yes, I will let you know when I have work also.
I have 2 questions. Can you give us an update on the equipment?
Oh, the recruitment, I said equipment. So for our BAC members, well, we talked to Greg and talked to Norm, their terms technically end at the end of the year.
Awesome.
And they are willing to re-up, and so we'll have a discussion about how long those terms are, but the longer the better. No, yeah, at least 2 more. And then we did a public recruitment, send out where people were able to look at the charter and what the expectations are and on the survey. And we got quite a few respondents, and there are a few that we've been in contact with who look like that they are pretty good applicants. But as we kind of dove into deeper, we get a lot of diversity in our applicants. So right now we're in the process of doing a little more intentional outreach to see if we can get some more diverse candidates. So the hope is by the time our next meeting, we have a couple of new applicants, but also give ourselves some time to do some more intentional recruiting and maybe bump that number of total BAC members up by early next year. Good.
And then our presentation will be on the 14th.
14th, correct. At the FNO committee.
Okay.
And one more housekeeping thing, we have not sent out dates yet for next year's meetings. And we will start looking at the.
Hi, Karen. I could have lied.
Start looking at the dates and send them out. And
So glad I
we'll
was
talk
here.
about them in the first meeting. Without Tom. Yeah, and
That's a good one.
It's gonna be weird sitting.
All the
shopping all there.
Yeah. Well, I think it was, I was supposed to be 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Okay.
Well, thank you for your, and everything done, reports are good.